Have you ever wondered why the man who disappears suddenly becomes the most unforgettable? Why the one who says nothing wields more power than the one who pleads? Because silence, when used wisely, is not absence, it is strategy. Power does not shout. It withdraws, it observes, and when it moves, the room shifts. When you stop reacting, when you no longer feed the hunger of others for your energy, your validation, your obedience, something astonishing happens. Panic. People begin to unravel. They sense your absence as a threat, not because you hurt them, but because you've stopped being available for manipulation. You were trained to be a servant of your emotions, to give instantly, to apologize before being blamed, to say yes, even when your soul screamed no. But Machiavelli would ask, who benefits from your obedience? Who profits from your predictability? The day you become inaccessible is the day you stop being a puppet, and those who thought they owned your strings will realize they never truly knew your mind. Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. So ask yourself, when your silence makes someone rage, when your absence unsettles them, when your calm provokes chaos, what does it reveal? Not about you, about them. Your reactions have been currency for too long, and you've spent yourself on those who never intended to repay. Every time you respond out of fear, out of guilt, out of the urge to maintain peace, you bleed, and they grow stronger, until what's left? Fatigue, frustration, a hollow ache where your power used to live. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. You're not here to serve the emotional weather of others. You're here to become sovereign over your own. This is the beginning of individuation, what Jung called the sacred path to becoming whole. And this path begins not with confrontation, but with withdrawal, not with explanation, but with mystery. So I ask you plainly, how many more times will you allow your wounds to be poked like buttons? How long will you dance every time they pull the string? Perhaps it's time to sever the string entirely, to become what they cannot define, to step back, not in weakness, but in strength. For when you vanish from their grasp, the game changes, and they will tremble in the presence of your absence. You were raised to say yes, to be polite, to be useful. But here's what they never told you. Excessive availability is not loyalty. It is a prison, and you're the one holding the key. The more you offer yourself freely, the less you're valued, because what is always present is never rare, and what is never rare is never respected. Withdraw, reclaim, command. That is the first step to becoming untouchable. When you make yourself too available, you don't become more loved, you become more used. Because once they realize you're always there, they stop trying. And slowly, you turn into a button they press when they're bored, lonely, or in need of a boost. An emotional emergency switch, quick comfort, instant validation. And when they've gotten what they want, they put you right back on the shelf. Unnoticed, unvalued, unnecessary, until the next crisis. But the tragedy is, you don't even see it happening because you're trapped in a comforting illusion, the belief that being there for everyone will make someone stay for you, that your loyalty will be reciprocated. But that's not how people work. Carl Jung warned us of this illusion. He called it the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, admired, welcomed into the tribe. It's the version of yourself that always says, I'm fine, even when you're drowning. The version that replies instantly to every message, even when you're exhausted and craving silence. The version that over-explains, justifies, apologizes, as if the world is entitled to your energy. But every time you bend, you leave yourself behind. Every time you place yourself on someone else's stage, you abandon your own script. And this too is a kind of betrayal, because being endlessly available is not compassion. It is quiet desperation, a disguised plea for validation, a way to prevent rejection, a desperate effort to control how others see you. But there's a price for all this performance, and that price is your peace. You leak energy like a cracked vessel, spilling pieces of yourself for anyone who asks, as if you had an infinite supply. But you don't. Your psychic energy is not bottomless. It is sacred, limited, finite. And the people who constantly demand your presence do not necessarily want you. They want what you give: validation, distraction, emotional cushioning. But when you start to shift, when you say no, when you pause before reacting, when you protect your time and stop dancing to their moods, they don't celebrate you. They get offended. They say you're distant. They call you difficult. They accuse you of changing. But the truth is brutal. They're not angry because you changed. They're angry because you stopped being useful. This is the cruel paradox of availability. The more abundant you are, the less you are valued, because what is always accessible becomes emotionally disposable, and no one cherishes what they didn't have to earn. So pause and ask yourself, who truly deserves your time, your presence, your energy, your attention? Or more honestly, who deserves your absence? But before you answer, we must first confront the root. Why is it so hard to pull back? Why do we react so easily, so automatically? Why do we rush to defend ourselves, to explain, to appease? Carl Jung had an answer. He called it psychic energy, the lifeblood of your inner world. And in the next part, we'll explore exactly why your energy is being stolen and how to take it back. Because if you don't guard your energy, someone else will weaponize it, and they'll use it, not to love you, but to drain you. In the last part, we saw that when you don't control your energy, others will, and they'll use it against you. Now let's go deeper. Carl Jung once warned, that which you resist persists. And it's truer than most people dare to admit. The more you react, the more you entangle yourself. The more you try to fix, prove, or explain, the more power you surrender, quietly, invisibly, but completely. People who walk around emotionally drained are not inherently weak. They're just misdirected. Their energy leaks into arguments, overthinking, and emotional chaos. And do you know what happens to someone who lives constantly exhausted? They become vulnerable. And a vulnerable soul, scattered, distracted, wide open, it becomes prey. Opportunists can smell it. Manipulators can feel it. Emotionally needy people can sense that you're the one who doesn't know how to guard your inner world. They notice that you react to everything, that you feel responsible for solving every crisis, and they take advantage of that, because to them, your constant response is fuel. Jung taught that a healthy psyche is one that knows how to contain energy, to keep it within the system. What does that look like? It means knowing how to say no without carrying guilt like a shadow. It means learning how to stay silent without feeling weak or ashamed. It means observing before acting, pausing before pouring, choosing your moment rather than reacting to theirs. Because real power doesn't scream, it doesn't flinch, it waits. It chooses the when, the how, and if. But that kind of control is impossible unless you know yourself deeply, ruthlessly. You must recognize your own impulses, your own patterns. How many nights have you laid awake, replaying a conversation that never got closure? How many hours have you wasted ruminating over what you should have said or trying to decode someone else's cruelty? That's not healing. That's energy bleeding. You are keeping old ghosts alive, ghosts that should have died long ago. And every time you react to the past, you feed dynamics that only exist because you refuse to let them go. Psychic energy, Jung said, is like a force field. When protected, it becomes presence. You walk into a room and people feel something. You don't have to speak. You just are. But when your energy is scattered, given to every voice, every plea, every provocation, you become fragile, reactive, invisible, and the world has no mercy for men who give themselves away so easily. So start watching your triggers. What makes you jump? What makes you explain, defend, chase? Those are the escape points. That's where your energy is leaking, and that's exactly where your inner work must begin. Not to become cold, not to become numb, but to become selective, to become sovereign. One of Jung's greatest insights was this: when you conserve your energy, you shatter the projections that others place upon you, and that, more than anything, makes them uncomfortable, because now you're stepping into dangerous territory, the realm of silent manipulation. And in the next part, we'll go even deeper. We'll expose how these opportunists survive off your availability. We'll explore why your refusal to react breaks the very game they've been playing. Get ready to look into the eyes of those who have drained you without ever raising their voice. Because you think you're in control. You think your reactions are conscious. But Jung would tell you the truth is far darker. Most of your emotional responses are programmed, and those who understand this can push your buttons with ease. They don't need to shout. They don't need to force. They just press the triggers you've left unguarded. Again, and again, and again. Jung called it projection, the act of placing onto others what we can't face in ourselves. But here's the part no one talks about. As others project onto you, you become a blank canvas. And the more emotionally available you are, the easier it is for them to paint their illusions on you. You've seen this. The friend who only calls when they're in crisis. The partner who praises you only when you're rescuing them. The one who loves you as long as you're useful. None of this is random. People aren't relating to the real you. They are reacting to a version of you, a projection you silently agreed to play. But why do you agree to it? Because you're afraid. Afraid of being a disappointment, afraid of being unloved, afraid that if you don't give, if you don't please, you'll be left behind. That's the root. And here's what makes it so effective. The most dangerous manipulation doesn't scream. It doesn't force. It whispers quietly through guilt. It settles into your bones when you feel you owe someone your time, your help, your emotional labor, even when it's draining your soul dry. And that's the core trap, because a true manipulator doesn't have to control you. They only need one thing: for you to keep reacting the same way, the same patterns, the same yeses, the same instinct to explain, to justify, to save. But the moment you stop reacting, everything changes. When you say no without flinching, when you choose silence instead of explanation, when you withdraw instead of chasing, you disrupt the illusion. The mask they placed on you falls. The version of you they used to play out their story dissolves. And suddenly, They don't know who they're dealing with anymore. That's when fear sets in, because now they're no longer able to hide behind your availability. Now they're forced to confront themselves. And most people are terrified of that. Your unavailability becomes a mirror, one they never asked for but now cannot escape. Your silence doesn't just remove comfort, it exposes noise. It reveals the internal chaos they've been drowning with distractions. And so they retaliate, they criticize, they accuse, they stir up emotional storms, not because you're wrong, but because you stopped being their convenient reflection. As Jung said, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And your withdrawal, that's what brings out their shadow, the part they've never dealt with, the part they've avoided by using you. But let's pause for a moment. What about you? Are you ready for the cost of protecting your energy? Are you ready to be misunderstood, to be judged, to be accused of being cold, selfish, distant? Are you prepared for the silence after the rupture? A silence that can feel like exile, but is actually the space where power begins to form. Because it's in that quiet aftermath where a new kind of strength is born. Not explosive, not performative, but enduring. And that brings us to what comes next. The modern world is loud. Everyone is fighting to be heard, to win, to reply before thinking, to prove they're right, even if it costs them their peace. But there is a power that very few know, and even fewer master. The power of silence. Not passive silence, not cowardice, but conscious, strategic, unshakably lucid silence. The kind of silence that isn't absence, but amplified presence. The kind of silence that turns heads, not because it's loud, but because it's composed. Jung saw silence not as emptiness, but as fertile soil, a place where insight grows. Because when you stop reacting, you finally start seeing. You see what was always there. Manipulation loops, emotional traps, patterns that kept you small. Silence is the beginning of clarity. And clarity is dangerous to those who seek to control you. Have you noticed what happens when you don't respond? When you don't defend yourself? When you simply disappear? They panic, not because they love you, but because they've lost the story they used to control you. When you speak, they can argue. When you justify, they can manipulate. But when you are silent, you break the script. True silence isn't the lack of words. It's power held within. A quiet, immovable core that no one can touch. And once you master that, you change the game forever. Silence is not weakness. It is the refusal to be dragged into someone else's emotional storm. It is the deliberate, conscious act of choosing your peace over pointless battles that drain your soul. Carl Jung once said that individuation, the path to becoming who you truly are, requires distance, because only in silence can you finally hear the voice of your own soul. But let's be clear, silence comes with a cost. It separates you from those who only valued your presence when it served their needs. It confuses those who only knew the mask you wore, not the person behind it. To them, you'll seem distant, arrogant, withdrawn. But is that really your problem? Or is it their discomfort in realizing that your silence means they no longer get to define you? The truth is hard. The more you evolve, the more selective you become, especially with your words. Because now you see every sentence as a piece of energy, every response as an investment, and not everyone deserves access to your truth. Sometimes silence is not escape. It is sovereignty. the quiet language of those who no longer need to justify, impress, or please. Yes, silence can be uncomfortable. It forces people to face their own noise. And that discomfort, it says more about them than any speech you could give. You don't need to explain your absence. You don't need to announce your withdrawal. Your silence explains itself. And those who feel threatened by it, those who get angry, who accuse, who push, are simply revealing how dependent they were on your imbalance to maintain their illusion of control. But the most powerful silence is not the one that disturbs others. It's the one that reconstructs you. The silence that connects you to something higher, something deeper than external validation. That's where the real healing begins, in that private inner space where no one's expectations live, where your energy no longer leaks from every pore, where your essence returns to you, whole, clean, and undisturbed. And that, my friend, is where we go next, because it's not enough to simply cut the noise outside. You must also learn how to channel your energy inside. You must relearn where it goes, where it stays, and, perhaps most importantly, where it should never be spent again. It's time to become selective with your own soul. And if you're on this path, if you're reclaiming your energy and redrawing your emotional borders, you'll find great value in my book, Beyond the Shadow. In it, I break down Jung's most profound ideas and give you tools to protect your spirit, set meaningful boundaries, and return to your authentic self. You'll find the link in the pinned comment. But hear this clearly. Knowledge means nothing if you don't act on it. You can understand everything I've said and still spend your life saying yes when you feel no. Still reply to messages that drain you. Still stay in conversations that echo with emptiness. Still cling to relationships that only survive on habit. Awareness without action is just another form of self-betrayal. Real transformation begins when you draw the line. It starts with one decision: to become selective, to master emotional discipline. Because true unavailability, conscious, deliberate unavailability, isn't about being cold. It's not arrogance. It's not cruelty. It's about no longer being a doormat for anyone at any time for any reason. It's about reclaiming your hours, reclaiming your thoughts, reclaiming you. And it begins with the smallest choices. Not answering right away. Breathing before reacting. Walking away from a useless debate. Turning off your phone and not feeling guilty. Saying, "Not today." Saying, "I'm not interested." Saying, "I won't engage." And here's what many forget. You don't owe an explanation. You don't owe your silence a footnote. You owe yourself peace. And to some people, that will always be unforgivable. Because when you stop explaining, you take away their power to trap you in the emotional script where you are always the helpful one, the available one, the controllable one. But that role, you've outgrown it. From the silence of the strong, a transformation begins, not just distancing from others, but finally drawing closer to yourself. Carl Jung understood this well. He taught that every path toward individuation, toward becoming your truest self, must pass through a sacred kind of isolation, but not the kind born from sadness or escape. This is an inner retreat, a sanctuary where your own voice becomes louder than the noise of the world. It is within this space that you begin to rebuild. Not from the expectations of others, but from the essence of who you truly are. Want to know a simple test of your growth? Watch who starts to distance themselves when you become quieter. Observe who begins to provoke you when you no longer react. See who accuses you of having changed when you finally begin to protect your peace. These are not signs that something is wrong. They are proof that something within you has awakened. At first, unavailability feels uncomfortable. You feel guilty. You question yourself. You wonder if you're being too harsh or too distant. But that discomfort is part of the dismantling. You are shedding years of conditioning, the belief that you must always come second. Of course, it will feel unfamiliar, but every person who once benefited from your self-neglect will now have to meet your boundaries. And many won't like it. Yet this is where true self-determination begins. Saying no to the world is, in fact, saying a bold yes to yourself. Walking away from toxic environments isn't rejection. It's a declaration that your peace holds greater worth than shallow connections. And when you stop explaining yourself, when you no longer justify your absence, people will begin to respect you, even if they do so silently, from afar. Not everyone will celebrate this version of you, because your refusal to be emotionally available forces others to face the chaos within themselves. Your withdrawal is not abandonment, it's revelation. It reveals how deeply they depended on your imbalance to maintain their illusion of control. And that's when the rupture happens. The pushback, the loneliness, the sting of rejection, the quiet ache of separation. But in truth, you're not losing anything. You're liberating yourself. So what happens after the silence? What is born when the noise fades? In the final part, we'll explore exactly that. The rebirth that only emerges when you have the courage to be misunderstood, to walk alone, and to finally become whole. And so, as you choose to become less available to the world, you are not running away from life. You are finally returning home to yourself. This is the moment when you stop reacting to life and start creating it. You stop being shaped by other people's expectations and begin to shape reality from your inner truth. And suddenly, the discomfort of others reveals something profound. They never truly valued you. They only valued the role you played. Now that you've stepped out of character, they no longer know what to do with you. And that, my friend, is freedom. You will lose people, but you will find yourself. You will walk away from old places, but you'll walk into your essence. You will be misunderstood, but finally, you will be respected, because when you're no longer available for everything and everyone, you become valuable. You become rare. You become unforgettable. Don't be fooled. This isn't the end. It's a rebirth, the first breath of a life where you no longer settle for emotional crumbs, where you no longer play along with shallow mind games, where you no longer accept voids dressed up as affection. From now on, you only accept what aligns with your peace, your truth, your wholeness. And if you've made it this far, it's because some part of you is already walking this path. Some part of you already knows. Being loved means nothing if that love requires you to abandon yourself. True love for self begins the moment you choose yourself, even if it means being alone for a while. Now let me ask you, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, even hated for the sake of your inner freedom? Are you willing to pay the price of becoming fully you? If this message spoke to you, if it stirred something inside you, then type it in the comments. I choose my peace. Let's see how many here are ready for the next chapter. And whatever you do, don't miss the next video. It's far more important than you realize. See you there.